Hi, my name is Phoebe Gao, and today we will be doing a media analysis of Ngozi Adichie's TED Talk, We Should All Be Feminists. To start off, first we need to figure out what Adichie's thesis is. In my opinion, Adichie's thesis through her TED Talk is to try and convince everyone, specifically the Nigerians and other Africans, to not only create awareness, but to also raise their kids differently. To achieve this, she is encouraging them to not teach nor depict any gender-specific stereotypes, as Adichie believes that if the new generation is taught differently, then it will eventually eliminate any prejudice or gender inequalities that we still see prevalent today. If Adichie's talk was a written essay, in my opinion, it would best fit in the persuasive category, because by definition, to be a persuasive essay, there are 4 main points. Try to gain the audience's assent, has a target audience, appeals to emotions more than logic, and uses many methods of proof. And in this case, these are all applied in this TED Talk. Firstly, Adichie is not presenting a balanced point of view. She is simply trying to convince the audience with her point of view by using many anecdotes on only her side of the story. For example, when Adichie addresses that a woman was gang raped in a university in Nigeria, the woman was blamed because simply Nigerians think that
by being born female, they're already guilty of something.
Adichie's speech is full of very strong negative connotation with no point of view of the other side. At times, she would present what may seem like a balanced point of view, such as suggesting that she sees why some people may think male are dominant, as it's part of their culture or history. However, she will always turn it around and manipulate the audience to support her ideas, as she is never truly or actually showing another point of view except for her own. In addition, the purpose of TED Talk has a targeted audience, as she is mainly targeting the Nigerians to raise their kids differently. As Adichie puts it,
gender matters everywhere in the world, but I want to focus on Nigeria and on Africa in general, because it is where I know and because it is where my heart is.
Which was the main point in her thesis. Furthermore, this whole speech appeals to one's emotions a lot more than logic, as the whole speech was based on many various anecdotes, her stories on how women are treated differently than men, and how she felt about it, and in a way she is trying to gain sympathy of the audience members through this process. When talking about not being acknowledged in a Nigerian restaurant, she states that
each time they ignore me, I feel invisible. I feel upset. I want to tell them that I am just as human as the man, that I am just as worthy of acknowledgement.
Which further shows how she is appealing to pathos more than logos. Lastly, through this whole speech, there was plenty of methods of proof used. In fact, almost all the methods of proof were used, as she showed her opinion, had historical references when talking about tradition and how it made sense thousands of years ago for men to rule the world because they were physically more stronger, as it doesn't anymore. Included illustrations, quotations, and references to authority. For example, when saying
Nobel Peace Laureate Wangari Maathai put it simply and well when she said, "The higher you go, the fewer women there are."
She also included personal observations, anecdotes, facts, which was a simple fact such as
about 52% of the world's population is female,
to contrast to the fact that many positions of power were still occupied by men. Rhetorical questions.
Now take cooking, for example. Today, women in general are more likely to do the housework than men, the cooking and cleaning. But why is that? Is it because women are born with a cooking gene? Or because over years they have been socialized to see cooking as their role?
And many more emotional appeals and literary devices. Moreover, other than the fact that the speech was perfect in fitting the criteria of a persuasive essay, the speech can also not be placed in any other category, as it is not a narrative, an argumentative, or descriptive essay, as it does not only focus on a personal experience, nor does it focus more on logic and reasoning rather than emotions, and of course, As it is evident in the speech, it contains a lot more than simply narrating the visual of a particular story. Adichie uses mainly 3 methods of development that helps her advance her main ideas and support her thesis. The 3 include narrative, compare and contrast, and cause and effect. Adichie uses narrative almost everywhere throughout her speech, from talking about her experience of sexism as a child in elementary school to her experience as a sexism that is still present today. With the use of narrative in her speech, she makes the speech much more powerful as it adds more emotional appeal to the speech. It allows for the audience to feel more sympathetic for her and see the injustice in the world through her eyes. It plays more with the audience's emotions as the stories tell injustice from both her point of view and other women's point of view, and together they work very effectively in convincing the audience of her thesis. Adichie also uses compare and contrast. Throughout the whole speech, Adichie compared and contrasted the treatment of girls to the treatment of boys. This renders the speech a lot more effective because it shows the injustice as it is comparing the treatment of girls who are much less superior to that of the boy. An example of such is comparing the different uses of the same phrase on both male and female, as it shows how much more females are expected to sacrifice. By comparing the two side by side, both different expectations, you can truly see the injustice in sexism. As for men, they would say this phrase to show how much they're loved, whereas for women, it shows what they have given up on. By comparing and contrasting, it shines a light on the socialization of gender and what is expected of the different races that should not still be present today. Lastly, Adichie also uses cause and effect to further depict the negative connotation that surrounds sexism. This was, of course, demonstrated and shown throughout the whole speech. However, the best example of this that was used in his speech actually depicted in a positive connotation, as Adichie talks about what can be done to eliminate sexism for the future. She believes that because we're teaching our younger generation different gender stereotypes, that is what continues sexism today. So that is the cause and effect. And by using cause and effect, she renders and suggests a solution. She believes that if we treat our kids equally, if we taught both the genders the same and focus more on an ability instead of their sex, we will be able to eliminate sexism sometimes in the near future. And by using cause and effect, she actually found a way to improve for the future, and this is what made cause and effect so effective in her speech, as it shows what can be done and offers a solution. All in all, the use of the 3 main methods of development makes her speech more powerful as it helps convince the audience of her thesis, therefore rendering her persuasive speech more effective as she is succeeding in persuading her audience. Furthermore, Adichie also uses many elements of style within her talk. The 3 main elements of style that she used was the use of a metaphor, the narrative point of view, and her diction and word choice. First of all, the metaphor. Adichie uses many metaphors in her talk. A particular example of such is when she states,
masculinity becomes this hard, small cage, and we put boys inside the cage.
By having this discrete metaphor placed in her talk, she paints a very negative and vivid image of how even the males are affected. And by painting this image discreetly, it enhances the audience's experience as it gives audiences a very great illustration of what she is talking about. So she's not only appealing to the audience's hearing, but to their imagination as well. Next, the narrative point of view. Now, this has been mentioned before, that the narrative point of view allows audiences to have more emotional appeal. However, what has not been mentioned before is that from the narrative points of view, it makes the subject a lot more casual, but at the same time, more realistic and unique. It creates something that will stick to the audience. There's always lots of talk about feminism, and sometimes it gets a bit repetitive. However, because Adichie used the narrative point of view, it made her talk different than the others because all the story was about herself, which someone else can't copy. By incorporating her own life, such as the way she was treated in restaurants or the way she was treated in the classroom, it really made the talk a lot more realistic, which makes her point more stronger and more effective for the audience to remember. To add on to the last point, the diction and word choice Adichie used were very unique and in a way made the talk more casual and realistic. By incorporating humor and word choices such as
hard man,
not only did it add to her talk by engaging the audience more, but it also helped her address the main point of her argument to affect the Nigerians. As Nigerian population is what she is specifically targeting, her word choice and diction all address the population as the word
hard man,
and the diction of that word allows her to bring her culture, a more specific example, into her talk. In conclusion, the metaphor, narrative point of view, and diction and word choice Adichie chose to use helped enhance her argument as it brought forth a more relatable, realistic, and cultural aspect into her speech, making it have a bigger impact on its audience. Other than the elements and the method of development that are used in Adichie's talk, she also uses many codes and conventions. In Adichie's talk, 3 main codes and conventions of auditory medium was used to aid in the communication of a message to the audience. These 3 include silence and pause, tone, and cadence. Firstly, silence and pauses. This code and convention was used to add suspense and draw the audience's attention when she's about to talk about a main point. It also very effectively allows the audience to think about this for themselves and reflect her point onto their own life. An example that was used in the talk was when Adichie states,
The problem with gender is that it prescribes how we should be rather than recognizing how we are.
This pause allows audience to think and reflect on themselves, as well as adding more attention to her next point, which aids in communicating the main idea of her thesis. Next, the use of volume was also used a variety of times in her talk. For example, when Adichie was talking about the time when she gave money, a tip to a man, she states,
I opened my bag, put my hand inside my bag, brought out my money that I had earned from doing my work, and I gave it to the man. And he, this man who was very grateful and very happy, took the money from me, looked across at Louis, and said, Thank you, sir.
As one can see in this example, Adichie, to emphasize her point, used a louder and more stronger volume on the words my or me. It emphasizes her point of sexism that was present in her particular experience, as it allows the audience to become more aware, once again, to the main message behind her point without her even having to say it out loud. And lastly, cadence. There were many uses of cadence in Adichie's speech. There were many times where she would speak faster when explaining a point, and where she would speak slower to emphasize her point. Furthermore, she also speaks faster when mocking a statement that was said by someone else. This not only helps the audience entertain, but it also shows her passion on the subject, and once again, brings attention to her main points while engaging the audience. The best example that uses all 3 of these codes and conventions was when Adichie said,
Gender matters everywhere in the world, but I want to focus on Nigeria and on Africa in general, because it is where I know and because it is where my heart is. And I would like today to ask that we begin to dream about and plan for a different world, a fairer world. A world of happier men and happier women who are truer to themselves. And this is how to start. We must raise our daughters differently. We must also raise our sons differently.
As you can hear, they will emphasize on the words happier, truer, must, dream, because those are the main points. Furthermore, she would speak faster when she's about to explain a point and slower when she wants to emphasize a point. And lastly, there was a silence, there was a pause to emphasize her point and draw the reader's attention onto that point. This particular sentence was very important to her overall message as it uses all three codes and conventions. As this statement is essentially her thesis. And as you can see, it effectively communicates without the author fully stating it, the author's tone, mood, and effective ability to fully engage the audience. Now that we're done analyzing the video itself, we can compare it to something more traditional, such as the New York Times Feminist Lost Now What essay. Now, after a quick read, of course one can see right away the obvious similarities as they both talk about feminism. However, upon closer examination, there are a lot more similarities in play than one may think, despite the obvious difference in the topic. First of all, in both New York Times and Adichie's speech, they both touch on the fact that there is a negative connotation behind the word feminist. In New York Times, it states that more boldly, there is a fear that women's issues as the movement has defined them. In addition, although this was differently phrased, Adichie's talk also states that
word feminist is so heavy with baggage, negative baggage.
Furthermore, to add on, in both of the essay and the TED Talk, they both claim, as the essay so puts it, the denial is very severe and how some women shun the feminist label altogether. In Adichie's speech, she was more specific in saying that many people, specifically the male, such as her friend Louis, still don't understand that it still exists, denying that they need to be changed. As he claims,
maybe in the past, but not now.
Moreover, she even states that
for both men and women, to bring up gender is sometimes to encounter an almost immediate resistance.
As one can see, in both they state how the word feminist has a negative connotation, and many people are still in denial that it is something that is still present today, in both male and female, as it is a heavy topic. In other words, they both subtly address the problem, in the meanwhile expressing understanding to why there is a problem to begin with. Next, another thing that was brought up in both is the fact that they both bring up different forms of oppression other than gender, such as class and race. In Adichie's talk, she states that
gender and class are different forms of oppression. I actually learned quite a bit about systems of oppression and how they can be blind to one another by talking to black men.
And then she goes on to talk about her experiences even more. In the essay, this point was also brought up, as many people saw the choice, specifically of black women, for voting for Trump as a choice that seemed to put racial identity over gender solidarity, and that white working class women saw Hillary Clinton as another privileged white woman wanting to break the glass ceiling. As one can see, once again, in both of these cases, they are both talking about how different forms of oppression, such as class and race, can be put out, and because of that, they will be oblivious to sexism. This is shown through Adichie's talk very clearly, and although not as clear in the essay, upon further examination, you can see that the essay also talks about how people are so into racism or into class that they become oblivious to the sexism that still exists today. Moreover, both raises the point that people are still more probable to look up at a male figure as the head because of their beliefs. As in the essay, it states that the fact that Trump won over Hillary was due to the fact that many women believe that Mr. Trump will keep the country safe in part of his paternalistic alpha male persona. This was also brought up in Adichie's talk, as she states that it is due to the socialization that we still believe in gender roles. Adichie went on even further to explain why this is, as it is due to the way we raised, whereas the essay didn't. However, they both did address this problem that is in our society's constant belief to look towards male characters or male personas as heads. In conclusion, both forms of media presented talks about feminism, and many aspects in both looked at were similar. However, there were very different purposes. One that was specifically targeted towards Nigerians, while the other talked about the results of election. However, they both expressed severe emphasis on how feminist is a bad word still today, and that it is still a very relevant problem today, and it is being oblivious or not seen due to many other forms of oppression. And lastly, right before I end off, when reading the New York Times article, there were many challenging words, and a way that I overcame this problem was by first reading the essay and taking down all the notes of challenging words that were presented. This is usually how I overcome any longer articles that I read. Some of them I would have already had a decent idea of what it means, but if I'm not 100% sure, and if I wanted to get a clearer picture, they would be included on my list. Then I will write down the sentence to get the context of which this word was used, and then research on the word in the dictionary or on the online dictionary to find out what they mean. From there, I will have my list of definitions as well as its context and the article. Then, from that point, I would reread the article, including after memorizing what the definition means, to have a full comprehension of the article. Now, sometimes, if I don't have access to a dictionary or an online source, which isn't very often, but say that was the case, what I would do is I would look around the word of the unknown word that I don't know, and from there make an educated guess, as usually most words have little hints of what they may mean. If you want to see my list of challenging words, their definition, and the context, you can go check out my script that is also linked in the Dropbox. And other than that, thank you for listening to my media analysis of the TED Talk, We Should All Be Feminists. This is Phoebe Gao, and I hope that you tune in next time. Bye!